Imagine being 18 years old, standing in a hospital hallway while doctors tell you your little brother has months to live. The treatment that could save him costs over $1 million. Money your family will never have. Then, out of nowhere, a stranger offers to pay everything. But only if you agree to marry him. He's 72 years old, a reclusive billionaire you've never met, and the world will call you a gold digger for the rest of your life. Would you say yes? Would you sacrifice your future to save the person you love most? This is the true story of how I became the teen bride of a man old enough to be my grandfather, and how that impossible choice changed everything. If you're ready for a story of desperation, secrets, family love, and redemption that will leave you speechless, stay with me until the very end. And if this sounds like the kind of real-life story you can't stop listening to, do me a huge favor right now. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to The Spoken Pen so you never miss a story like this again. Also, drop a comment below and tell me which part of the world you're listening from today. Whether it's New York, London, Sydney, Mumbai, or a small town just like mine. I read every single comment, and I can't wait to see where this story reaches. Now let's begin. When I was 18 years old, I stood at a crossroads that no girl my age should ever have to face. My name is Emily Harper, and this is the true story of how I married a 72-year-old billionaire to save my little brother's life. It's a story filled with heartbreak, impossible choices, secrets, betrayal, and in the end, a kind of redemption I never saw coming. I grew up in a small, fading town in central Illinois, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your business, where cornfields stretch farther than dreams ever reach. Our house was a modest two-bedroom ranch with peeling paint and a leaky roof that my dad patched every spring. Mom waitressed double shifts at the truck stop diner on the highway, and Dad drove a delivery route that kept him away from dawn until dusk. Money was always tight, but love wasn't. My little brother Jake was the heart of our family. 14 years old, all freckles and boundless energy, with legs that never stopped moving and a grin that could light up the darkest room. He lived for soccer. He dreamed of going pro, of playing under stadium lights while we all cheered from the stands. That dream was everything to him, and watching him chase it was everything to us. Then, one October afternoon, everything changed. Jake came home from practice pale and shivering, even though it was warm outside. He said his legs felt like lead and his chest hurt when he breathed. Mom took him to the emergency room, thinking it was the flu. Hours later, the doctor pulled my parents into a quiet room and delivered words that shattered our world. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, aggressive and fast-moving. They started treatment immediately, steroids, chemotherapy, spinal taps, but the standard protocol wasn't enough. There was an experimental immunotherapy trial in Boston, one of the only hopes for long-term survival in cases like his. The catch? It costs $1,200,000 up front, plus ongoing expenses that could climb even higher. Our insurance laughed at the idea of covering it. Experimental, they called it. Not medically necessary. We tried everything. Mom organized bake sales and spaghetti dinners at the church. Dad sold his beloved '67 Mustang, the one he'd restored with his own hands. I quit my part-time job at the local grocery store and started waiting tables at the diner with Mom, pulling 12-hour shifts after school. We launched a GoFundMe that crept painfully toward $20,000. Generous, heartbreakingly generous, but nowhere near enough. Jake's hair fell out in clumps. His weight dropped. He spent more days in the hospital than at home. Some nights he was so weak he couldn't even lift his head to smile at me when I read him his favorite sports magazines. I was supposed to be applying to colleges, dreaming about nursing school, maybe even leaving our little town for the first time. Instead, I sat by his bed holding his thin hand while machines beeped around us, praying for a miracle we couldn't afford. That's when I first heard the name Reginald Harrington. He was a ghost story in our part of the state. A reclusive billionaire who lived 2 hours away in a sprawling estate hidden behind stone walls and ancient oaks. Everyone knew he'd made his fortune in Silicon Valley during the early tech boom, then multiplied it tenfold in real estate and private equity. He was 72 now, widowed twice, childless, and famously private. The local gossip painted him as eccentric, cold, maybe even cruel. But there were darker whispers too. Rumors that drifted through the diner late at night when wealthy out-of-towners stopped for coffee. They said Harrington had a habit of seeking out young women for arrangements. Not affairs exactly. Marriages. Legal, discreet, and lavishly compensated. A beautiful young wife on his arm for galas and board meetings. Someone to warm the empty rooms of his mansion in exchange for financial security beyond imagination. I hated myself for even listening. But one sleepless night, after Jake had been rushed back to the ICU with a dangerous infection, I opened my laptop and started searching. I found old society page photos of his late wives, both significantly younger than him, both gone too soon. I found obscure forums where anonymous posters hinted at non-disclosure agreements and seven-figure settlements. And then, buried deep in a private message board for executive assistants and estate managers, I found a name and an email address. An intermediary who handled sensitive personal matters for Mr. Harrington. My fingers trembled as I typed the message. I didn't mention marriage. I simply explained that my 14-year-old brother was dying, that there was a treatment that could save him, and that we were desperate. I attached photos of Jake, healthy and smiling on the soccer field, then pale and bald in his hospital bed. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. The reply came less than 6 hours later. A woman named Victoria Lang arranged a meeting at a luxury hotel an hour from home. I drove there alone in our rattling old Civic, wearing the only nice dress I owned, a second-hand black wrap dress that suddenly felt childish and cheap. In a quiet conference room, Victoria and a silver-haired attorney named Mr. Ellison laid everything out with calm, clinical precision. Mr. Harrington had reviewed my email. He was prepared to fund Jake's entire treatment, immediately and in full, as an anonymous charitable donation. No strings, no publicity. But if I was willing to consider a more permanent arrangement, the support would extend far beyond medical bills. They slid a folder across the table. Inside was a draft marriage contract. In exchange for becoming Mrs. Reginald Harrington, I would receive immediate payment of all current and future medical expenses for Jake. No upper limit. A monthly allowance of $50,000 for my personal use. Full financial support for my parents. Mortgage paid off, retirement accounts funded. A trust fund in my name that would mature to $200 million upon Mr. Harrington's death, provided I remained married until then and honored the confidentiality clauses. The attorney emphasized that the marriage would be legal and public in name only. Separate bedrooms. No expectation of intimacy unless mutually desired. A clause I clung to like a lifeline. I would be required to reside at the estate, accompany him to occasional events, and present the image of a devoted wife. In return, I would want for nothing. I felt the room tilt. Why me? I whispered. Victoria's gaze softened for the first time. Because you're young, beautiful, and you love your family enough to consider something this drastic. Mr. Harrington admires loyalty. And he's lonely. They gave me 48 hours to decide. I drove home in a daze. When I told my parents, Mom collapsed into sobs, begging me not to even think about it. Dad's face turned to stone. We'll find another way, he said, voice breaking. I'll sell the house. I'll take out loans. You are not for sale, Emily. But that night Jake coded in the ICU. His heart stopped for 47 agonizing seconds before they brought him back. The doctors pulled me aside afterward. "He's running out of time," they said quietly. "Without the Boston trial, we're looking at months, not years." I sat in the hospital chapel until dawn, staring at the stained glass window of an angel. I thought about Jake never playing soccer again, never graduating, never growing up. I thought about the life I would be giving up: college, first love, freedom. And I thought about the life I could give him in exchange. I called Victoria the next morning and said yes. The whirlwind that followed still feels like a fever dream. Blood tests, medical exams, NDAs thicker than phone books. A prenup that protected Harrington's empire while guaranteeing my family's future. And finally, one gray November afternoon, I met Reginald Harrington in person. He was waiting in the grand library of his estate, seated in a leather wingback chair beside a roaring fire. He was smaller than I expected, frail, almost bird-like, with thinning white hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through me. A cashmere blanket covered his legs. He didn't stand when I entered, but he extended a thin, veined hand. "Miss Harper," he said, voice soft but steady. "You're even younger than the photographs suggested." I shook his hand, surprised by how cold it was. "Mr. Harrington." "Reginald, please. If we're to be married." A faint smile touched his lips. "I want to be clear. I will never force anything upon you. This arrangement is unconventional, but it need not be cruel. I ask only for companionship and discretion. In return, your brother will live." His directness disarmed me. There was no leer in his gaze, no false charm, just weary honesty. I nodded, unable to speak. The wedding took place 3 days later in the estate's conservatory, surrounded by blooming orchids and the scent of earth after rain. Only 4 people attended: Reginald, me, Victoria, and the judge. I wore a simple ivory gown chosen by a stylist Reginald hired. No veil, no flowers in my hair. My family stayed home, the pain was too raw. I walked down the short aisle alone, heart pounding so hard I thought it might bruise my ribs. When the judge asked if I took this man, my voice came out steady somehow. "I do." The moment the ring slid onto my finger, a platinum band with a single flawless diamond, wire transfers began. By nightfall, the Boston hospital confirmed receipt of funds. Jake was airlifted there the next morning. I moved into Harrington Estate that same week. The house was staggering: 42 rooms, marble floors, artwork that belonged in museums. Staff moved like ghosts. Housekeepers, chefs, groundskeepers, a private nurse for Reginald. I was given an entire wing on the second floor. Bedroom, sitting room, bathroom larger than our old house. Everything was beautiful and cold. I unpacked my single duffel bag of clothes and cried until I fell asleep. The early months were the hardest. I woke each morning in a bed bigger than my childhood bedroom, staring at a ceiling painted with cherubs. I missed the sound of Jake's laughter, Mom's off-key humming, Dad's truck rumbling in the driveway. Reginald was polite but distant. We took breakfast together most days in the sunlit dining room. He read the Wall Street Journal while I pushed eggs around my plate. Conversation was limited to pleasantries. But slowly, almost against my will, I began to see the man behind the myth. Reginald had built his empire from nothing. An orphan who left school at 16 to work in a factory, who taught himself coding on library computers in the 70s. He'd loved deeply twice and lost both wives tragically. He had no children because, in his words, I was always too busy conquering the world to build a family. Now, at the end of his life, the world felt empty. He started inviting me to the library in the evenings. He'd pour himself a small sherry and ask about my day. I told him about Jake's progress, the way his blood counts were improving, how he'd started kicking a soccer ball again in physical therapy. Reginald listened intently, eyes bright. One night he said quietly, "You gave up your future for him. That kind of love, it's rare." I shrugged, embarrassed. "He's my brother." "No," Reginald replied. "Most people talk about sacrifice. Few actually do it." Gradually the ice thawed. He encouraged me to enroll in online college courses, paid for everything without being asked. He had his chef teach me French recipes when I mentioned missing Mom's cooking. On nights when his arthritis flared, I read aloud to him, classic literature, biographies, even the sports section when Jake's travel team made the news. And always there were updates from Boston. Jake's doctors called them miraculous results. His cancer markers plummeted. He gained weight. His hair grew back thick and wild. The first time I visited him after the transplant, he ran to me across the hospital lobby and nearly knocked me over with a hug. "Emmy," he whispered into my shoulder, "you saved me." I cried so hard the nurses thought something was wrong. But not everything was peaceful. Reginald's extended family, distant nephews and nieces who'd been circling like vultures for years, caught wind of the marriage. Suddenly, the estate saw more surprise visits than it had in decades. His nephew Victor was the worst. Slick, handsome, 45, and convinced the fortune should be his. He cornered me one afternoon in the rose garden. "How much did he pay you, sweetheart?" he sneered. "Did you cry for the cameras when you signed the prenup?" I tried to walk away, but he grabbed my arm. Before I could react, Reginald appeared in his wheelchair, propelled by his nurse. His voice cut like a blade. "Remove your hand from my wife, Victor, or I'll have you removed from my will permanently." Victor backed off, but the hostility lingered. Anonymous tips were leaked to tabloids. Billionaire's teen bride. Love or gold digging? A photographer hid in the woods and snapped grainy photos of me by the pool. Reginald's lawyers shut it all down swiftly, but the damage lingered. I felt like a specimen under glass. There were nights I questioned everything. Was I a prisoner in a gilded cage? Had I sold my soul? But then Jake would FaceTime me, laughing about a goal he'd scored, and the doubt quieted. Time passed in seasons of hope and fear. Year 1, Jake reached remission. Reginald's heart issues worsened. He survived a minor heart attack with me by his side in the ICU, gripping his hand the way I once gripped Jake's. Year 2. I earned my associate's degree online, then started a bachelor's in nursing. Reginald attended my virtual graduation ceremony from his bed, clapping weakly when my name was called. Year 3, Jake turned 18, tall, strong, cancer-free. He visited the estate for the first time and shook Reginald's hand with solemn gratitude. "Thank you, sir," he said, "for giving me my sister back." Reginald's eyes filled with tears, the only time I ever saw him cry. Year 4. Victor and his cousins launched a legal challenge, claiming Reginald was mentally incompetent and I'd unduly influenced him. The case dragged through courts for months. I sat through depositions where I was called every ugly name imaginable. Reginald testified via video link, sharp as ever, dismantling their claims with calm precision. We won. He rewrote his will that same week, increasing my trust and adding substantial gifts for Jake and my parents. Year 5. Reginald turned 80. His body was failing, but his mind remained keen. We spent more and more time together. Long conversations by the fire, watching old movies, planning charitable foundations. He taught me about investing, about philanthropy, about navigating a world that judges women harshly for unconventional choices. In quiet moments, he'd call me my dear girl with genuine affection. One spring evening, as dogwood petals drifted past the library windows, he took my hand. "Emily," he said, voice frail, "you've given me more than I ever gave you. These years, they've been the happiest of my life." I squeezed his fingers. "You gave me my brother's life. And you gave me a future I never imagined." He passed 3 months later, peacefully in his sleep, with me reading to him from his favorite Hemingway novel. I held his hand as his breathing slowed and stopped. The room was quiet except for the ticking of an antique clock. The funeral was small, just as he wanted. Jake served as a pallbearer, strong and steady. My parents sat beside me in the front pew, holding my hands. The will reading shocked the remaining family into silence. The bulk of the $10 billion estate went to charities, children's hospitals, cancer research, scholarships for first-generation college students. But Reginald left me the estate itself, liquid assets worth nearly $600 million, and controlling interest in several private companies. Jake received a trust that would make him comfortable for life. My parents' home was paid off, with annuities ensuring they'd never worry again. Victor contested, of course. The legal battle lasted 2 grueling years. I fought not for the money. I could have walked away with more than enough, but because it was Reginald's final wish. In the end, the courts upheld everything. Victor slunk away bitter and broke. Now, at 30 years old, I stand on the terrace of what is still called Harrington Estate, watching the sun set over gardens Reginald loved. I run the Harrington Foundation, which has funded treatment for over 300 children with rare cancers. I finished nursing school and work part-time in pediatric oncology, holding the hands of scared siblings the way someone once held mine. Jake is married to a wonderful woman, coaching youth soccer and expecting their first child. My niece or nephew who will never know how close their uncle came to never existing. People still whisper. Galas at grocery stores, online. Gold digger. Trophy wife. How much did she get? I let them talk. They'll never understand the nights I cried myself to sleep at 18. The terror of choosing between my future and my brother's life. The slow, unexpected grace that grew from the ashes of that choice. Reginald wasn't a saint. He was complicated, proud, sometimes ruthless in business. But in the end, he was kind to me in ways no one else ever saw. And I, in turn, gave him the family he never had. Was it worth it? Every single day. If you're watching this and facing an impossible choice, know this. Sometimes love asks everything of us. Sometimes the hardest path leads to the most profound healing. And sometimes the most unlikely unions become the deepest blessings. That's my story. The one I never thought I'd have the courage to share. From an 18-year-old girl who felt like she was selling her soul, to a woman who found strength, purpose, and an unexpected kind of love in the hardest choice I ever made. Life isn't always fairy tales and happy endings, but sometimes the darkest decisions lead us to the brightest light. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening all the way to the end. If this story moved you, touched you, or made you think about the sacrifices we make for the people we love, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to The Spoken Pen with notifications turned on, so you're always the first to know when a new unforgettable story drops. And one last thing. Please comment below and let me know, where in the world are you watching from right now? Are you in the USA, Canada, the UK, Australia, India, Philippines, South Africa, or somewhere I've never even heard of? Tell me your city or country, and if this story hit you in a special way, share that too. Your comments are what keep this channel alive, and I can't wait to read them. Until the next story, take care of the people you love. This is The Spoken Pen signing off.